I want to have a conversation with you. I missed this segment, and I'm actually leaning into it here because you used to do this a lot, and it's the "Get Off My Lawn" segment. And I've put out a couple of tweets about this. I've seen some great articles about this, and I just want to talk it through with my buddy and with you all right now. So the two things that spurred this are, number one, there was an Outkick article that came out with Wilbon on the LeBron James story. For those of you not following, LeBron James has been on this Taylor Swift tour of absolutely emaciating everybody from the Pat McAfee show. He was talking about Stephen A. Smith. He was saying that Brian Windhorst is not his friend, kind of made him look like a weirdo, which is a little bizarre. But one of the questions that was asked was, there was a story somewhere about how ESPN and Fox Sports 1 have covered Bronny more this season than Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who's the front runner for the MVP. Wilbon said, "That's right. I didn't even think about that. That's true. They talked about him more than Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. That's pandering. It's all pandering. Let me be clear. Our business is a POS a lot of days." Talking about that specifically, we have talked about Bronny James, LeBron James, and Michael Jordan debates every single day. People are wondering why people are not watching the NBA. Maybe it's because we're not talking about SGA being the MVP frontrunner and Nikola Jokic averaging close to a 30, 13, and 10 on 60% shooting. Billy, why are we talking about the NBA? Okay. Bomani Jones said maybe one of the dumbest things that I have heard in this calendar year this week on his podcast, because everybody has a podcast, including us. He said that the NCAA tournament was better when you couldn't watch every game. He was trying to make the case that the NCAA tournament, which is one of the greatest months in this great country, should be moved to red zone. And in lieu of what, Bomani Jones? Would you like to have more First Take, more Get Up, more of this absolute garbage that runs on these television networks all day long? Everything about sports, from college to professional, has been TMZ-ified. It's pop culture is where it started, and now it's shifted into sports and politics. I actually went back and looked at the television schedules for ESPN back in the day. In 2010, there were 4 daily opinion debate shows. In 2010, we had PTI, Around the Horn, First Take, and the Sports Reporters. It's now 2025. We have 7 of these daily opinion debate shows with 2 additional season ones. So you have 9 debate shows on television every single day, all day, every day during the week. On ESPN, you wake up on Monday, and it used to be, Pat, when we were growing up, it was the 2-minute drill, da, 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 and you get the whole rundown of all the plays. You get to watch the home runs. You get to watch, they're talking about the Padres. They're talking about golf. They're talking about everything. They're talking about the actual games that we're playing. Today, every weekday from 8 to 10, it's Get Up. I respectfully cannot stand Greeny. I think he's brutal. Well, what do you think about this? Here's what I think. Can't stand it. Then you shift right into First Take, where you got Shannon and Stephen A. screaming at each other. Okay. We used to have JJ Redick in there, who was almost inciting violence on the show with Kendrick Perkins. And then you go 12 to 2 with Pat McAfee. That's 6 hours of just opinions on nonsense all day. I got to tell you, Pat, I really think that my problem with it is, if you're in our shoes, you've gotten to a point where you know what sports you like and you know what journalists you like to listen to. For me, I love Ryan Russillo, I love SVP, and I love Bill Simmons. So I choose to go and listen to them talk about it. But if you're somebody that's new coming into sports and trying to figure out what sports do I like, what games do I like, and finding that voice, you don't have the option to do that, because everything is so catered towards, let's turn this into TMZ. And I don't know how to fix it.
I can't tell you the last. Well, first of all, I cut the cord. I don't have cable. I don't even have YouTube TV. Like, once March Madness hits, I do not have YouTube TV until football starts.
Yep.
I know there's like an MLB package. What's the package called for MLB?
MLB TV.
Okay. So, yeah. Don't care for any of these shows that are going on during the day, because also the model has changed for all of us, right? Like, we can go ahead and access our favorite content at all hours of the day. And it's become hyper focused that every single person can have a platform. Whereas back in the day, ESPN.com was my homepage of my computer because there weren't that many other areas of resource. And now the mediums have just exploded. You're scrolling TikTok, you're scrolling Instagram, you're scrolling Twitter. You know, PTI and RIP Around the Horn, these were shows that were always on when we were kids because there weren't any other options too.
But do you know what was great about that? What was great about that was those shows brought in people who actually were doing journalism where it was occurring. So if the Boston Celtics, for example, were playing in the finals, Bob Ryan is coming in to talk about the Boston Celtics. What I can't stand is I don't need, nor do I believe Shannon Sharp and Stephen A. Smith can be experts on baseball, basketball, college basketball, UFC, boxing, NFL. It's just crazy. And then that's where you get into a point where it's turned so much less into, hey, here is a very unique take on something that I've actually spent a lot of time following and being invested in, into, hey, here is I read the headline and I'm going to give you my take. And I truly feel bad for the younger generation that's sitting through this. Like, if you think about the creativity that used to exist over at ESPN, like you mentioned PTI, sports reporters were great, Around the Horn, sports science, like you're looking to occupy 30 minutes. Let's get Kevin Love under a basket and have him try to box out a sumo wrestler. Was it crazy and off the wall? Sure, but it was interesting and it was different. We just have the same recycled nonsense playing on television all day. And it's really unfortunate. I mean, what was your morning routine before you went to school? I looked forward to seeing Buccigross on my television talking about the Dodgers game that I couldn't watch because my dad told me I had to go to bed. And I would watch that. I'd go off to school, and then there you have it. I miss those days, and it's so much less about actually what's happening on the court, the diamond, and the pitch, and it's more about what did Russell Westbrook wear to the game, and just everything else but the actual sport itself.
Sports Center was so epic back in the day. Linda Cohn, you had Stan Verrett, who's still involved, but not as good as he used to be. R.I.P. Stuart Scott, Steve Berthume. I remember he had some crazy comments back in the day. Remember Harold Reynolds? He was never a Sports Center guy, but other than watching Sports Center, it was reading a book, doing your homework, or playing outside, playing kick the can or, pick up hoops. That was it. You mentioned the local outlook. How much did you love? And I know they still do it, but it just doesn't hit as good as it used to. You got Sal Palantonio in Philadelphia. You got Ed Werder reporting on the Cowboys. You got Tim Kirkjian or Pedro Gomez up in Boston. You got Buster Olney reporting on the Yankees, like the local guys in the local lore.
Because they're watching it. They're actually watching the games. They're not hearing, oh, the Yankees won 10 games in a row. Let me become a subject matter expert on the other 80 games they played and then speak on the story. It's just throwaway nonsense. It is. I don't know how they fix it. And Pete B, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I mean, how do you recommend they fix it when this is just a product of the environment now? Like, you're not going to get hyper specialized and exciting shows in the middle of the day when these super talented folks who could be on those shows are on their own shows, on their own networks, and their own podcasts.
I think that the turnover has really hurt, and they're almost leaning too far into the personality versus the story. Like, I grew to love Stan Verrett and Buccigross and all of these guys, Buster Olney, because the way they articulated what they were talking about was so impressive. What it's gotten to now is, and I'm actually a big fan of what Pat McAfee is doing, and I like that his is more interview based, and it feels like you're sitting in a room with your buddies talking about the sport. That's fine. But we don't need to do that for 6 hours. the whole thing where it's like Stephen A. Smith, they almost have like a live stream of Stephen A. Smith walking into the arena for a Knicks game to see what he's wearing, who he's talking to, and he has on like his game face. And I'm not trying to vilify Stephen A. I'm not trying to vilify Skip, because they both created what is printing a billion-dollar industry. But it's gotten to the point where it's so diluted. Pete B made this point. He said, there's never been a better time in history to find coverage of your favorite teams or sports commentators. That's completely true. But ESPN, CNN, Fox News, politics, and sports, here's what you've seen. Split offs. Bill Simmons is at the Ringer. He brought Russillo, Zach Lowe, and Todd McShay over there. Sage Steele, Jamel Hill, Colin Cowherd. I know he's still on Fox Sports 1, but he's doing his thing with the volume. So they've all found their own way where, hey, you like my commentary? Come find me over here. In politics, Tucker Carlson, Don Lemon, Megyn Kelly, Chris Wallace, and now Gavin Newsom, you can go find what they're talking about. But the problem is the point of entry for I want to get into sports, it is so hard to find actual sports. The days that I would pretend to be sick and stay home from school and watch ESPN all day, in the middle of the day, they weren't like, hey, let's just get Mike and the Mad Dog up here talking for 6 hours. They would actually put on a 30 for 30 or put on something super unique, which I loved. And unfortunately, we moved away from that. So
I just lost you too. We're good. Do you have a goat? Like, do you have a goat? Or like, hey, you have, why don't we just do this? Mount Rushmore of your favorite sports commentators since you've been alive.
Okay. I think the most talented person and the most timeless person that ESPN has at their disposal right now is SVP. I think SVP brings the feeling of nostalgia on how much he cares and how well prepared he is to talk about subjects. Like to me, he is the class of that industry right now. So he would be on there for me. I didn't prepare this. I'm just kind of going off top here. Bill Simmons made ESPN millions of dollars coming up with the 30 for 30 concept. He's doing an amazing job over at the Ringer. I think that he has been absolutely great. And I know this isn't a sports commentator, but again, I think the medium of SportsCenter did such a good job of, hey, here is somebody that will talk to you about what went on today. And that medium helped me grow to love Stuart Scott, helped me grow to love all of those guys. So I really appreciated it. To round it off, I'll just go with College Game Day. I think that it's one of the few things that we have left that is so special and so ingrained and so hyper-focused on the things that make college football special. They do a really good job of tapping into the stories that you may not be following if you're a Virginia Tech fan. And there's this amazing story of a walk-on from Stanford, and here's his impact on the team. And here, it just does a really, really good job of telling a story. So I would say those are probably like my four. I know two of them aren't people, but I think the medium of College Game Day and the medium of SportsCenter did a really fantastic job of kind of ingraining that into your day-to-day.
There you go. I'm with you on SVP. I listened to his pod with Stanford Steve as much as I can.
It's great. Yeah, it really is.
They're just fun. They're talking about going to Starboard. They're talking about going skiing. They're talking about being dads. You know, I love SVP's, kind of his come up in golf in the 90s. So that's cool. Speaking of golf, Mike Tirico. Tirico's an all-timer.
Yeah, he is.
Whether it's calling a Notre Dame game or calling a Tech game back in our early games of the ACC, you think of the Eddie Royal touchdown at Georgia Tech in 2004, his call on that game. Mike Tirico does a great job for the World Cup and soccer as well. So I have always had a big chip of respect for Tirico. Chris Fowler is.
I was about to say that has to be the next pick. Yep.
It's really hard to. And I don't want to discredit either of them, but I think Reese is just as good as Chris Fowler. I think Chris Fowler brings a little bit more of nostalgia since he was there in the early days of College Game Day, coming to Virginia Tech. His article about Tech after the tragedy in 2007 and what that meant to him to go back to Blacksburg on September 1st for College Game Day against ECU that year. I also just admire his love for tennis. It's so not aligned with just football in general, and I just like his content that he puts out there as well. His
Instagram is a must follow. You got to follow him on Instagram if you're not.
It's good stuff. I'll throw, since you brought it up at the end there, I'll throw in Tom Rinaldi, the storytelling around golf and around college football as well, because that's kind of the nostalgic factor that we all kind of want. What kind of stories are going on around the game? Like Tyler Trent from Purdue, for example. Or anything going on around campus, over the summer that's reported on in that first College Game Day. I'm sure they worked their butt off too, getting all those spots.
Just a couple of other things, and I promise we'll end this here. It's funny how it went from, remember the days where people were like, wow, Jay Billis is really outspoken. But I always appreciated it because Jay Billis was speaking of it from a place of like, I've been through this. I have felt this way for years. And now Jay Billis is one of the least outspoken people like on ESPN. So again, I'm not really hating the player as much as I am hating the game. It's so rewarded now with clicks and everything else. And this could be its own podcast, but the NBA has consistently been bending over backwards to say how much their game is growing based upon how many people are watching TikToks and Twitter about the games. There's a whole generation of people who are fans of the NBA, but their fandom is, oh, I saw this highlight reel of SGA last night. You don't watch the game. And I'm not hating on that. It's just so different than what I'm used to. So I hope at some point, to put a bow on it, I hope at some point we can find a way to get back to the games mattering more than the nonsense stories that are just pattering out. I do think one name we missed is Holly Rowe. Holly Rowe does a great job.
Oh, dude.
Holly Rowe does a really, really good job.
You just met her. Didn't you see her at the game?
Yeah. I ran into her at the Ally tip-off this year, which was great. She works so hard. And does a really, really good job. And I'd also say too, I think the family of networks outside of mainstream ESPN, if you watch ACC Network or you watch SEC Network, their schedule is much different than ESPN, but a lot of people don't have those channels. So if you go to ACC Network, they'll have some highlights about like campus tours, deep dives on coaches' careers and different things. And that I'm much more interested in that than I am in, let's talk about Bronny James in the G League. But hopefully there are brighter roads ahead on this dialogue and how it goes.